You good?
Yeah.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I know it's going to take just a little bit for people to hop online, and we're out here at the Haupt's home. So again, we took around the table on the road and wanted to be able to engage just a little bit differently. So we're going to give you a little bit of space to get on in your own timing, and you can. Jayme, I'll kind of give you the ins and outs. See right there, we just see those people numbers go up, as well as the likes go up. Those are the things that we're shooting for tonight within that. So hopefully we're going to be able to dodge some raindrops tonight. I'm not sure if it's settling in to a beautiful night or not. I'd like the humidity to leave just a little bit.
Yes, yeah, that's for sure. I was outside cutting the grass the other day, and my riding lawnmower decided to quit on me, so I had to finish by hand. And yeah,
you have a small parcel of land to cut, right?
Yeah.
Right. It's just like a postage stamp, like what we have in our house. I haven't told Caleb yet, but that's his job tomorrow. Is that he's got to cut it, or it's going to be taking down a hayfield for us.
Oh, you'll be thrilled
soon, right?
Be thrilled.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So again, we're kicking off around the table through. Okay. We're still connected. Sorry, technical difficulties possibly. Actually, from his son, his oldest son, JJ.
Right. Yeah.
JJ was not only with us last week, but JJ is the keyboardist that plays on the worship team, and so we figured we go to Dad. The other thing that we found out last week was that one of JJ's favorite bands is an influence from you as well, and that was
John Denver.
John Denver, right? You want to tell us just a little bit about that whole connection with John Denver?
Yeah, I remember JJ last week was saying that I think the only CDs that were in the car were John Denver and Shania Twain, and Shania Twain would have been from my wife Danielle. And John Denver, I got my love for John Denver from my mother. I can remember as a preteen sitting around the dinner table with Mom after we had dinner. Sure. And some of the quiet hours of the night, and it was either Marty Robbins or John Denver. So that was my start with John Denver.
That is awesome. I love it. Well, again, here with Jayme Haupt with Around the Table, and our desire with Around the Table is to kind of give the opportunity for us to have some fun, maybe a little bit behind the scenes, behind the curtain of people's lives, my life, but then also being able to have the conversation around faith journey. And so we want to be able to have that conversation with one another, and we're going to hear more about Jayme's story, but also being able to have the conversation with you. And so encourage you, as Jason already has done, to hop online and share the chat as we dialogue with that together, and just look forward to tonight of really being able to look at how does God work in difficult times. And I know that was very real for you, and I think it's very appropriate for what we're walking through in this season. So I look forward to getting to that question here shortly. But to get things started up, you already mentioned a little bit of what it meant to grow up with your mom as a preteen and her influence with music. But kind of where did you grow up? Where are you from originally, Jayme? And tell us just a little bit about kind of your original stomping grounds.
Sure. I grew up in Manitowoc. And I went to Manitowoc Lutheran High School. I actually went to, I grew up as a Lutheran, and I went to First German Evangelical Lutheran grade school.
Okay.
And then Manitowoc Lutheran High School. And I stayed in Manitowoc until I believe I was 20. And then at that point, I moved to Green Bay. And that's where I attended school.
As far as college and getting your degree up there.
UW.
Cool. So when you grew up, did you participate in sports? And if so, what sports did you participate in?
Yeah, I participated in every sport I could.
We're moving the table. Every sport you could?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah. So I played football, basketball. Basketball by far I was the least talented in, and also track.
Okay. Nice. And I know a little bit of the story, so that's why I want to ask. Now, you were a stud in football, right?
I wouldn't say stud, but I did all right.
You did all right. You did all right. But surprisingly, track was probably your go-to, Or what you had the most success in?
That was my most successful sport. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what were you successful at in track?
I was a jumper, believe it or not. At 5'8", I did the high jump and the long jump.
Okay, so at 5'8", you were competing in the high jump.
Yes.
And you did well as far as like successes, and what did you accomplish within that?
Well, in the long jump, I won the state track meet as a junior.
Really? At the long jump?
In the long jump.
Okay.
And in the high jump, I did 6'3.5", and actually held the school record for 33 years. Nice. A small school.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's still a school record. So that's awesome.
This is back in the 70s. So at that time, that was pretty good.
Oh, absolutely. Especially at 5'8". That's what I think is so. I mean, 7.5 inches taller than what you are. I mean, that's it's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So what was your long jump?
Yeah, it was 22.3.
22.3. Okay. Wow, that's awesome. No, I appreciate you sharing that, Jayme. And I'm kind of curious within that, what have you noticed with kind of how God has worked since then? You said you kind of went off to college in Green Bay and then began to kind of get into the professional realm. What did you kind of begin to do professionally and engage in that one?
Yeah, professionally, I remember my first job after I left college was I worked for a company called Haupt Finance.
Okay.
And which was quite an experience.
Okay. You have any good stories from that?
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I have some stories about that. But I used to have to go knocking on doors for $20 payments, and it was the worst job of my life.
Okay. Well, I think you just gave up a great question in regards to that. Worst job you ever held. So that was one. That would you say is your worst job?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Nobody should be subjected to that, either on the giving or receiving end.
Right. That's awesome.
Prior to that, when I started working back in Manitowoc, I worked for my uncle who owned a landscaping company.
Okay.
And I started that when I was 14 years old. And I remember coming home after the first 2 days and telling my mother that was it. I'm done.
You're done.
Because that was back before they had the machines to dig the holes for you. And
well, they had them. It was called the Jayme. Right?
Yeah.
It wasn't Bobcat, or it wasn't the backhoe. It was
right,
Jayme.
Right. Yeah. And getting the trees off the flatbed. It wasn't a Bobcat. It was three guys.
Right.
And but I think that also that job attributed to a lot of my success in sports in high school because it made me so much stronger.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. So from landscaping to Haupt Finance, kind of where did things go next for you?
After that, I got my start in the retail automotive business, and which is most of my adult life has been spent working in that area.
Okay.
There were a few detours at certain times. I took a little hiatus. I worked for a marina as their sales manager for about 2.5 years. That was a great job in the summertime, all the way up until about September.
Okay.
Until March.
Okay.
And then
that was really slow.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah, we would close for at least a month or two every year just because there was nothing to do.
Oh, wow.
But in the summertime, it was great.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Enjoying that time. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. But like you had mentioned, you did a lot within the car industry as sales manager, as
in the car industry. I actually started off as a finance manager.
Okay. That's right.
I did spend some time selling cars as well. Not a lot of time doing that. Spent some time in sales management. And then later on in my career, I worked for a couple of larger dealer groups, and I was the director of finance for those groups. Sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, for those of you who are still coming on, again, we appreciate Around the Table here with Jayme Haupt. And one of the things that we kind of started talking about was one of the things that he mentioned that wasn't even on the script was worst job you've ever held. And so I encourage you, if you have one of those worst jobs, we'd love to be able to hear from you. I think probably for me, I think it's probably after I finished my senior year of high school and getting that first kind of summer job. It was at Pat's Farm, Pat's Incorporated up in Pullman area, and I had to sweep the floor. So it was a 1 million square foot building, and me and this other guy started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, finished at 3 o'clock in the morning, and we just swept and swept and swept and swept. And so I think that was probably the worst job. And you wanted to get it done quickly because then you could go help out other guys. But that was pretty miserable. Worked for Schreiber Cheese up in Green Bay for a summer, and that was just different. And definitely was a confirmation that I love cheese. I didn't eat much cheese that summer, especially hard cheese. But definitely that was definitely a different one. So I think Dave just mentioned grinding plastic scrap for 12 hours a day. Ooh, that would be bad.
Yeah.
With the boss who yelled at me for everything I did. Yeah, it looks like Jason, tongue in cheek, had a similar boss. So that's awesome. So appreciate that. Melissa, awesome. Oh, bed cleaner for a salon, tanning salon. That is awful. I think that I think that passes my sweeping and even having to get yelled at for $20 payments.
Yeah,
Woo,
yeah, absolutely.
Nasty. Don't even want to know what's going on there. So, one of the things that's interesting, though, Jayme, is the fact that not only were some of your jobs within the car industry, especially as the finance director or manager, was something that you had consistent, but you did well at, that you had some incredible success at. But all of a sudden, life throws a curveball in the last year and a half to 2 years. And why don't you kind of take us down that path of what happened about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, and you don't have to get into details, but all of a sudden, everything that you thought you were moving towards, and one son in college, another one going to be in college, and all of a sudden your world gets turned upside down. So why don't you kind of share with us kind of what happened at that point?
Yeah. So life was good at that point. You know, I had enjoyed a fair amount of success, and I guess felt too comfortable.
Okay.
And because the rug gets pulled out from underneath you just at that time, right? But yeah, it was. I was displaced from my employer of 9 years, and I never dreamed in a million years that would happen. And I won't get into specifics, but it wasn't from neglect or anything like that. It was just a decision that was made. And while I respect that decision, it was also a very difficult time for us. Given my age, sometimes you don't have as many career choices any longer, sure. or some people maybe prospective employers may question your longevity. So I thought my choices were somewhat limited. So about the first month after that happened, we just took some time together at home to recover,
sure.
Essentially. Mostly for me to recover, my family being extremely supportive during that time.
Sure.
But for me to decide what was going to take place next, or what we were going to, what were we going to do. And the decision came that we were going to start our own business, and I was going to get into consulting for the automobile industry, which I had worked in for 25 years.
Sure.
So
yeah, absolutely.
A scary step. Starting all over again.
Right. Yeah, from ground zero, in the sense of you don't have that income coming in consistently because you're starting out on your own.
Yeah.
And not only was there that time to kind of take a breath of like, hey, what in the world are we going to do within that? But you also adjusted your schedule drastically because when you were working at least the last 9 years, you were traveling down to Milwaukee 6 days a week, 5 days a
Five or
week,
six.
5 or 6 days a week. And
Yeah.
so not only would you be putting in 10, 12, 14 hours a day at some sort, you also would have to tack on that drive time as
Yeah.
well. And so now all of a sudden you're like, you go from being gone so many hours to now being home.
Yes. Yeah. It was quite an adjustment, and I think especially for my wife.
She is in the other room, so it's going to be very kind, whatever is going to be said. But absolutely, it's a huge shock.
Well, imagine it's, and I can imagine if the shoe was on the other foot, how I would feel about it. That she took care of the house for our entire married life, and I generally wasn't around to get in her way.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And all of a sudden I was.
Right. As much as you were set in your ways, so was she.
Right.
And there was nothing wrong with that. It was just the reality of it.
Right. Yeah. And there's just an adjustment period there because you have to kind of work through those things to establish how this is going to work out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you go from coming at home, trying to get adjusted, making the decision, and you said a few prayers, and then just like that, everything is smooth sailing, right?
Precisely.
Good.
No.
Well, I really appreciate being able to come over to Jayme's house. If you just pray a little bit harder, your life too will be a success.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite that. When I got into this, I thought that the experience that I had would help me gain some traction. I was very wrong. I knocked on a lot of doors of people that I knew, thinking that because of those former relationships or because of the experience that I would be able to offer them to benefit their business, that this wasn't going to be too tough.
Sure.
And like I said, I couldn't have been more wrong.
Sure.
Aaron and I had numerous conversations during these times, and he and Sam were both extremely helpful during this. And there were more than just a few prayers said. My prayer life changed dramatically during this time for the better. And I think that once it turned from asking for everything to more giving thanks for things, even though I found it difficult to give thanks at that time, is when things started to turn around. So,
because the reality is that we're well into 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, and you have no income coming in or very little because you may have gotten a deal here and there, but definitely nothing that you're able to live on. Right. Or very little to live on.
Yes, we were.
And you're tapping into your retirement, which even though he has more hair than I do, he's closer to retirement than I am.
Very much closer.
Yes. But being able to tap into something that much earlier, and you're seeing doing everything you can to keep your expenses or lowering your expenses, but your income is lowering, you're not having anything come in. And there was these moments of just absolute desperation. So when you say you shifted of your prayer time of everything that I want or need into, I'm going to pray for gratitude, what are you thanking God for in the midst of losing so much?
Well, I think that I have to give my son some credit for that. JJ went to YWAM and experienced that youth with a mission, and he came back with a different outlook on life, and he shared a lot of that with me. And through some of those talks, I think he was able to change my focus a little bit. He never doubted once that the business is going to be successful. He never once. And he said he prayed about it often, and that the feeling that he got from God was that everything was going to be fine. And of course, I didn't feel like it was going to be fine at the time because as the clock was ticking, it's not a good feeling to use the things that you had worked your life for so that you could retire and have some kind of security. And we were using that little slice that we had built up during this time. And it's difficult to kind of open up your eyes. And I think that once I stopped giving myself credit for things and gave more to God, that's when things really started to happen.
So I appreciate you saying that, because I think it's so easy, and it doesn't matter if you're in the car business, if you're a teacher, if you're in a factory, if you're a pastor or whatever. It's easy to be able to look at life and say, hey, look at all I've done. Look at all that I've accomplished. Look at all that we've been able to make happen. And even if there's a sense of some sense of humility in the fact of, well, this is what God has done too, there's still kind of this, no, we've done this. We've made this happen. And so what I hear you saying is that there began to be a shift of, it wasn't about all the things that you were able to accomplish, but it was ways that you partnered with God as God worked through your life to be able to say, hey, this is what I want you to step into. Yeah, right? Is that
absolutely, without a doubt? And I remember one evening sitting out on the back porch, which I spent a lot of time during those days at the night, and just looking up at the stars and praying and just saying to God, you know what, I can't do this on my own. I really need you to step in. But it took me admitting that I couldn't do it on my own for things to really change.
Sure. And I think that's what's so huge of being able to say, you know, what does surrender look like? And deeper humility within it, right?
Right. Yeah. It was definitely a lesson in humility, but he's never wrong. So
as much as we want to think,
so
maybe you got this one off.
That's what I needed. Okay.
Now, you had mentioned a little bit that you engage more with prayer, and you would have these different moments with God. But even though you grew up in the parochial school setting all the way through high school, what was your faith journey like before all of this?
Before all of this, like as I mentioned, went to a Lutheran grade school, a Lutheran high school, but everything became too robotic for me. And sure, I knew the catechism, and I had some Bible passage memorized and things of that nature, but I didn't have a relationship with God. Certainly not the kind that I have now. So there was not enough giving thanks, and just it was a relationship of convenience, perhaps.
Sure.
For lack of a better expression, but there certainly was not enough gratitude in that relationship.
And so you really saw the shift of it really being personal, that it was more about the gratitude and embracing the goodness of what God was doing and being thankful for whatever that goodness looked like.
Exactly. Yeah. And it made me think back to many times in the past that his hand was at work, and I never realized it. During those times, you have a lot of time to reflect on things, and some of your thoughts are not good thoughts. Right. And you mentioned despair, and when you're at risk of losing everything that you think that you have built when you truly haven't, those thoughts can creep into your mind, and that's exactly what the enemy wants, right?
Sure. To take you down. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. When you look at, because you had, the other thing you had begun to see is that you were getting to the 11th hour of not just waiting and sitting back, because you and I had even talked about, like, hey, I'll apply a Kohler, I'll work this, I'll work that. It doesn't matter. I don't. If God wants to put this dream on the side or something, then oh man, okay, I'm willing to do that. But you couldn't even get any traction there within it because of other challenges, right?
Right. Yeah. I would say it was the 11 and a half hour.
It was 11, and was it a full year?
It was a full year. It was a full year, Jadena, for our first compensation from when I left, right? The very same day.
No.
Or
You
close to that.
Close to 8 months.
8 months.
It was a small client.
Oh, it was a very small client. So it was a year.
Sure.
When we feel like you made it.
When we felt like we had some sense of security.
Sure.
And it took that because we had gained a little bit of traction, but it was certainly not enough to sustain us.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the 11th hour.
Mm-hmm.
And
sorry, when we say 11th hour, I mean, were you thinking bankruptcy? Were you thinking selling the house? Were you thinking, I mean,
all of those things come into your mind,
right?
And you don't want any of those things to be reality. You had mentioned that we had a chat, and I was willing to do anything at that time. I didn't want to give up on the business, so I did look at some other things. I looked at some third shift work, mm-hmm. So that we would have a little bit more security, and that I could continue to work on the business and during mm-hmm. several hours during the daytime. Sure. Actually got an interview with the company for a third shift factory job, and I didn't get it.
It's not qualified.
Yeah. Well, it's they say overqualified, but they don't tell you that, right. Okay, because they can't really tell you that, right? But they just said that we've decided to move in another direction.
Sure.
So yeah, so at that time, there are some more conversations on the back porch in the evening, saying, mm-hmm. Okay, what's this all about?
Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely. But as you continue to keep that posture of surrender and keep that posture of humility, and even in both of those, not only were shown in the way that you approach God in your prayer and within your heart, but even in the willingness of God, I'll do whatever it takes for me to continue to provide for the family. So there's a sense of surrender and humility there as well. And then all of a sudden, through almost a year of these desperate pleas, things began to change, right?
Yeah, things began to change. And it was weird. I remember I was driving, doing some prospecting in an area south of here, and some lights came on in my car. Okay, true story. And I'm like, oh boy, nah, not this too.
Right. And where you don't need to say where you purchased this car, but it was your previous employer of where you purchased the car, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So I took my car in the shop to have him take a look at it. I was still under warranty, so I wasn't too concerned. But while I was there, I decided to have a conversation with the owner, and I had zero intentions of doing that because I really didn't think that it would be fruitful. Right. I didn't think that he would want to discuss a situation with me, and I couldn't have been more mistaken. Mm-hmm. He welcomed me into his office with open arms, and we had a great discussion. And after that, several months later, it came full circle.
And not out of a vengeful way, but out of God's generosity way.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. Complete generosity. it just I think about that sometimes, that the lights came on in my car. It wasn't just coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence.
Mm-hmm. Right, absolutely.
At that exact time, and so his hand was at work there too.
Mm-hmm.
And I was shaking in my boots.
Sure.
Walking in there, but I gave it up to him, and he made it happen.
Sure. Right, absolutely. When you look back at what this last year and a half, 2 years have been, um, and again, we've kind of talked about this, the surrender and the humility and the gratitude, and what would you want to be able to encourage folks with, that maybe walking through a hard time within their own life? And because you and I both know it wasn't just a magic wand.
No.
And this isn't, I want to make sure you guys hear us, that this isn't saying something in relationship to the prosperity gospel. And if you just keep on doing good, good will be done to you. There is nothing about this that spoke into that reality, because of the darkest day. And you continue to be faithful in following the steps that he was opening. And it, at this point, the story has been God's blessing through those moments.
Yeah.
And so, what would you want to encourage folks with tonight, that maybe one of those dark moments, that maybe in one of those situations that it's the 11th hour and there's a desperation?
Yeah.
What would you like to encourage them with?
My encouragement would be that discouragement is exactly where the enemy wants us, right? I mean, that's where he does some of his best work.
Right.
But if you decide to give it to him, okay, surrender, and that's the word that Aaron used, and it's the right word. That if you do that and you have complete faith in him, okay, and like Aaron said, it wasn't a magic wand. And I didn't ask God to make a deposit in our checkbook. Okay. He came through. Mm-hmm. We prayed about it diligently. I tried to follow where I thought he was taking me, and things came together. So I would say that he does his best work when we are at our weakest, right? And to stay the course. And sometimes the trials that we face in life, I think, are for him to shape us so that his will can be done, and that perhaps we're better equipped to handle the blessings that are to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really resonate with that, because it's one of the things that when we look at, there's so many times when we look at the way that God uses transformation, right? Change. Like we want that picture of how God is going to transform our lives to be soft and gentle, and almost to the fact of, oh, this is kind of easy. But very much like the picture that we see within the Old Testament of that we are the clay and he's the potter, and it's, oh, he's going to gentle hands on us or whatever. But I think sometimes we miss the fact that sometimes he needs to reset us, and he takes the clay and he pounds it on the ground. And we're like, oh, no, that's a little too hard. Or the imagery that he uses, that he's like a refiner's fire, taking iron, and the only way for iron to be formed into what it needs to be is to go under incredible heat. And so going underneath that furnace and that heat. And I heard this earlier today about, kind of connected with that furnace. And so many times we look at that other Old Testament story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They got thrown in the fiery furnace.
I just read that today.
No way, did you?
I did.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. I was listening. We had not had this conversation. This is not a setup. And what's interesting about that is that even though that they were willing to stand for the faith, and they did get thrown into the fire, that there was a fourth in the fire with them. And I think that is really what I hear you being able to say, is that the faith aspect is that when we go to God in all these different ways, there's a fourth in the fire with us.
Yeah.
And we don't know what that fire is preparing for us. But what I thought was cool too is that as we go through that fire, and as we see Christ's presence with us through that fire, there's a fire then that burns within us to live out his passions differently.
Absolutely.
And that's something that's happening for you currently now, right?
It is. It is. Through through all this, I've had a lot more time on my hands. But I've been able to do some things now that I would have never been able to do in the past. I got involved with the youth group, which I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah.
I did. Great kids, and it's just such a blessing to be able to do things like that. Where I'm also participating in a men's study group on Thursday evenings.
Cool. Which, guys, if you're watching, thank you for letting us butt in on your Thursday night men's group. I appreciate you letting me steal Jayme for a little bit. So yeah,
there's just so many different things that he's blessed us through this.
You find a way of cooking.
Yeah, I Danielle just said I'm cooking a lot more, and it's true, and I actually enjoy it. But just things that you think about and realize that he's been a part of, and even going to church on Sunday. If I don't go to church on Sunday now, something is missing for me. Okay, it didn't used to be like that, and frankly, on Sundays I used to sleep. I was so exhausted from the week that was my day to sleep in, and that is not an excuse, but I used it as one.
Absolutely.
But just little things like that. And I actually did read that today. That story.
That's so crazy.
It's amazing. And the fourth was seen in the fire as well by the king.
Right.
And then who proclaimed God's glory. He's there with us. One of the things that I also would share with people is Psalm 50:15. And it says, "And call on me in the day of trouble. I will deliver you, and you will honor me." So true. And we stop taking credit for the things that we think we've accomplished, and realize that he's helped us through those times, that he continues to bless us more than to me than I could have either imagined.
Absolutely. No, and I appreciate you, Jayme, taking the time, and folks, when we get back together, and I'll give you a little bit of a plug. Okay, for those of you who've been loyal and watching and wondering, hey, when are we going to get together? We're going to start announcing that this Sunday. This week we will not be together, but we'll be sharing the plan of when we're going to start transitioning to open again. And you'll hear more about that on Sunday. So there's a little plug to make sure you tune in, and hopefully get some of those questions answered, as well as we're getting very close to that, as we honor those who are excited and desire to be back, as well as those who are cautious. We will continue with our live stream. But when we were talking just before this, you had made reference to the fact that the ways that God has blessed you, fiscally through this, is that you have a desire to be able to be a blessing in a variety of ways for others in the future. And I stopped you for a second, right?
Yes, you did.
And I said, Jayme, you already are being generous with what God has been doing in your life. And a lot of it's because of the things that you've been doing and what you've already shared, in the ways that you're investing in people's lives, completely different than what you had in the past. The ways that you've been available for your family, the ways that you have been able to model what does it really mean to commit to the things of God, and to walk through the darkness. And that blessing and that being able to be generous in that way is something that's amazing. And I understood your statement, and I believe it's going to be true. But knowing that it's so much more than just fiscally, right? And so I thank you. I thank you for walking this out in the ways that you did, because you realize that this could be a completely different story.
Oh, it could be. It could be, right? And I would also encourage people to find the right people to surround you. Like this man right here. There were a lot of times that Aaron and I and Sam and I had conversations walking through this, and when I needed to refocus, and that's precisely what they were able to give to me. Surround yourself with the right kind of people that are God-centered, and it'll help you stay the course.
Cool. Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that, Jayme, and I truly enjoyed, even though it's been a challenge for you, I've enjoyed being able to walk this out with you. So
it is. It's easy to laugh about it now.
Right. I'm not sure if Danielle's ready to laugh about it, but
but yeah, there were some dark times.
Absolutely.
But
well, hey, folks, I'm going to give Jayme a chance to flip the tables on me. He's going to ask me a question or two. We'll see where that goes. But I do want to give you the opportunity, as we're going to bring this to an end here shortly, is that if you have any prayer requests, I want to encourage you to be able to jot them in the chat. I want to be able to have the opportunity to lift you up in prayer, to be able to share in prayer with you. And so if you do have anything, please put it in the chat. We'll make sure we get to it here in a second. So, Jayme, we wanted to flip the tables just a little bit. And did you have a question that you wanted to be able to ask me?
Yeah. One of the things that I am curious about is, in your pastoral role, what is your favorite thing to do? I mean,
sure.
And we all know that you just work 1 day a week,
right? Yeah.
No,
you're good.
I had to do that.
Absolutely.
I've heard him say that before, and I know that is not true. But one of the things that, if it's not the thing, one of the things that you enjoy most about it.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is one of those things. I'm glad you didn't ask the opposite part of the question of what do you hate the most. Maybe we'll answer that another time. But I was even just kind of having a conversation with someone about it this afternoon, because I think there's a part of my nature and the part of who I am that I enjoy being a jack of all trades and a master of none. And so I do like to kind of dabble in a lot of different things within the church world and the pastoral world. And I think for me, it really comes down to two things. I really do enjoy teaching. It doesn't really matter what it is. I enjoy teaching small group. Enjoy being able to teach on a Sunday morning. I think that's part of the reason why I enjoy coaching, because it's an element of teaching. And so being able to have that element within there, so I can see that in so many different ways. So teaching is one. And then I think the other one that I really enjoy is kind of coupled with that, but just in a more personal nature, is counseling, or really being able to seep into people's lives maybe differently than what they can see, and trying to listen to the Spirit and speak insight into people's lives, and then see those lives changed in so many different ways. I really just I love being able to see how people have these heart aha moments, and it completely transforms their lives, or relationships or situations. So I think those are probably the two: teaching, and then that spiritual insight of counseling would probably be two of my favorite things to do.
Awesome.
So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And I'd also like to know, and this might be more difficult, and I won't say the most impactful, but one of the most impactful things that you experienced during your faith walk.
And you're impactful or difficult, challenging? Yeah, any of it.
You can tackle them both if you'd like.
Yeah. Yeah, that one is hard. I'll go with two. I have a hard time answering just one, because there's just so many things. I think one of the most impactful pieces was the season of brokenness that I walked through back in 2002. and leaving a youth ministry position in Fond du Lac, and taking an extended break from ministry, and not knowing if I'd ever be back in ministry, and just that utter brokenness of where who am I? So it's definitely my identity piece, because I felt as though that I was just a piece of crap, and so walking through that brokenness and seeing how God was going to rebuild me in that way, and having to surrender and having those dark nights of the soul, and um, walking it out in that way. That's where I think a lot of my ministry, a lot of the way that I do relationships, began to shift completely different, and living out in that way.
So that was God's way of like I said, it just struck me what I said before is preparing us for blessings that we're to receive in the future.
Yeah, there's no way that you could tell me that in be sitting here having this conversation and what he's done since then.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I think the other thing is just those moments of courage. Like, we're going to be celebrating a year of being in our new building, even though we've only been in it for 9 months, I guess, since the last 3 months we've been out of it.
Yeah.
But the courage to step into that, like, there's no flipping reason why we should have stepped into that space that we did, and just being able to see how God worked in so many different ways, and just saying, hey, if you have the courage to trust me, if you have the courage to step out, if you have the courage to invite others into it, if you have the courage to risk, and again, that whole blessing piece of what God has done with that is just absolutely amazing. So brokenness and the willingness to step out in courage.
Yeah. That's amazing. Yeah. That reminds me of a song
by John Denver.
No.
Okay.
What I've gotten into worship music a lot more since JJ returned from his mission trip, and that's another thing that really speaks to me spiritually is music. For some, I don't know why, but it just really tugs at the heartstrings sometimes. And there's a song called "Do It Again." And, you've never failed me yet, right? So
yeah, that's awesome. You're good at this, Jayme. All right, again, folks, we're going to take a moment to pray, and if there is anything that you want to be able to jot down, please go ahead and do that. And we're just going to take a moment to pray with you, to pray for you, and just kind of really seek God together within that. And so, yeah. Should we do that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you. Thank you for this time. I thank you for the ways that you work and move. And Lord, just thank you for Jayme being able to share portions of his life and the ways that you walked him through it. And even though it was dark at times and unknowing at times, Lord, his struggle and his commitment to how you worked and moved is just so powerful. And we thank you for that. And we thank you for the ways that he grew in his relationship with you and his family. And we also thank you for the job opportunities and the commitments from all these different businesses. And so we just thank you for that. We give you that honor and glory. And Lord, we want to just lift up to you right now that if folks are going through a variety of different things, and I know that there can be very much a heaviness, even a sense of feeling like you're doing this alone. And Lord, I really ask that you would that your presence would be very real for those who may feel alone in it right now. That they would see that fourth person, that fact that Christ was with them in the fire. That they would see that you are with them in the fire. And I ask for that. Lord, I also want to take a moment and lift up Kathy Ferguson to you. And Lord, the news of her husband having a significant stroke yesterday, And Lord, not knowing if he is going to make it much longer. We pray for peace for the family right now. Lord, I pray that you're just covering of protection upon Kathy right now, and just your tenderness and care for her and for her children and her grandchildren. And Lord, we just lift up her husband Gary to you, and we ask for a peace for him as well. We ask for a sense of your presence during these potentially final hours or days, Lord. And we ask that you would be very real in his life. Lord, we thank you that he has a relationship with you and he knows you personally. But Lord, we pray that you would tend to him, tend to the family. And Lord, we just continue to trust you for our steps ahead. We continue to trust you for the things that we can see and the things that we cannot see. And we know that you make that promise that you will do it again, that you will bring victory, that you will bring hope, that you will bring resurrection. And so we thank you for that. In the power of your son's name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Jayme, again, I want to thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And allowing us to hang out. And just, I'm going to tease you guys just a little bit because Danielle made an opportunity to have some cookies. So we're going to enjoy some cookies here. Folks, again, if you need anything, please reach out. Please contact the church office or shoot me an email. And if there's anything that you need, please let us know. All right. Thank you. Appreciate it. Grace and peace.
God bless.